Hi guys, Karen Schwartz here, and today in this video I'm going to do a demo for you for one of the projects here on Koalgo. If you haven't been to Koalgo yet, Koalgo is a website where students can do 4 projects that are experiences that help them integrate coding and English skills. And those 4 projects are the simile generator, the oxymoron machine, the metaphor maker, and the couplet creator. And today we're going to take a look at our metaphor maker. So you just come here to koalgo.herokuapp.com, and then you can scroll down to metaphor maker and hit this get started button right here. So up here at the top, I have a description that just talks a little bit about what a metaphor is and gives some examples of metaphors. And these 3 metaphors right here, we're actually going to be using in the project. Now, I do want to point out that for this project and for any of the other projects as well, you can have your students use original examples. You can have them make up their own metaphors to use in the project, or you could pull metaphors from literature that you are currently reading. There's a lot of flexibility here. And of course, you can also use the metaphors here that I have provided for you. So in this little introduction area, I talk about how we basically have a structure for a metaphor that looks like this. This is kind of like our metaphor formula, if you will. And that is that a metaphor in a very simple structure consists of a noun phrase, and then we have some sort of to be conjugation like is, are, am, something like that, and then we have the second noun phrase. So again, this is a very simple metaphor structure, and when you are teaching this project, you can also take time to talk to your students about how we have different types of metaphor structures, and there are definitely metaphor structures that are more elaborate and complex, but generally when we are starting out to teach students about metaphors, this is what we generally tell them, right? This very basic structure. So after we have that explanation, we go down to the project area. So you're going to spend most of your time here with the steps and with the editor. I did want to point out that you also have this solution that you can click on, your students can click on to see the answer, and there's some teaching ideas right here for how you can integrate this project into your English class, and then there's some teaching standards for you to plug into your lesson plans, and some Python references for you as well. So when your students are doing the project, the first thing that they're going to learn about is this idea of a noun phrase, right? Which is something that contains a noun and other descriptive words like articles, adjectives, or other parts of speech. So if your students are not quite sure what a noun is or what a noun phrase is, be sure to review that with them before you have them jump into the project. So step 1 is just kind of reviewing what that noun phrase is. In step 2, your students are going to do a little bit of practice with variables and values. And one thing that I do want to point out here is that you'll notice, depending on which step you click on, that's going to affect what you see on the right-hand side in the editor area. So for step 1, you are going to see on the right-hand side the space where we are actually building the project. And you'll see here in the green text, these are called comments, and these are going to tell your students, it's basically a truncated form of the steps to just tell or remind your students, here's what you're doing in this space, okay? But for step 2, you'll notice that it looks a little bit different on the right-hand side over here, and that's because in step 2, the students are going to be doing some practice with variables and values that's not actually part of the project. They need to understand this concept in order to do the project, but the project is all going to be built in this other editor. And you'll also notice that it, like I said, it changes depending on what step you're on. So let's just say, for example, we're in step 1, and let's say that we type some text here, okay? And then step 2, it's going to change because this is our practice space. But then when we go back to step 3, we're going to see that same text again right here, and we're going to see the same thing for steps 4 and step 5. So just be aware of that. So okay, so like I said, in step 2, the students are going to do some practice with variables and values. This step just walks them through what a variable and value is and has them do some practice over here. Then in step 3, this is where students are actually going to start writing code for their project. So one thing I do want to say is that this project, the Metaphor Maker, is probably the simplest of the 4 projects. For this project, students are basically just dealing with variables and values and something called concatenation, which is when you are just adding things together, basically. So some of the other projects include things like the random module and zero-based indexing, which can be slightly more complex concepts for kids to understand. And so if you want just like an easy project to sort of help your students get their feet wet with variables and values and playing around with language, this metaphor project can be a good one to get started with. So here, basically what we're going to do is you're going to have students look at the metaphors that I've provided, or the other metaphors that you want them to use, but for the sake of this demo, we'll use the metaphors that I provided. And basically, we are just splitting them up into noun phrases. So if you remember, we talked about our formula, which for a metaphor, which basically tells us that a metaphor consists of a noun phrase plus a to be conjugation plus another noun phrase. So if we go back to step 1 here, so for example, let's take a look at this first one. All the world is a stage, from classic Shakespeare, right? So our first noun phrase here is going to be all the world. And then our second noun phrase is, can you guess? It is a stage, yes. And then those 2 noun phrases are joined together by the word is. And for this project, I've chosen metaphors where the connecting word, the to be verb conjugation, that is the same for all of the metaphors. So we have all the world is a stage, Juliet is the sun, dying is a wild night, just to keep things simple. Okay, so once you're in step 3, it talks about and it explains to the students how they're going to split their noun phrases into variables and values. So basically, we want a separate variable for every noun phrase, okay? So because we have 3 metaphors and each metaphor contains 2 noun phrases, we're going to end up with a total of 6 variables. I'll say that one more time. Because we want to assign each noun phrase to a variable, and we have 6 metaphors with, let me start over. That's confusing. Sorry. Okay, so we want to have a variable for each noun phrase. Okay, we have 3 metaphors, and each metaphor contains 2 noun phrases. So you multiply 2 by 3 and you get 6. So that means we're going to have a total of 6 variables that we are dealing with. So then if you look over here, it says declare a variable for each noun phrase in the metaphors. Okay, so in order to do that, and this is something that step 2 where it talks about variables and values, this is something that goes into a little bit more in depth, so please go and read that, but for right now we're just going to type some code here. So we're going to have noun phrase 1B or 1A, and we're going to have noun phrase 1B. So basically what we're doing here, like I said, is we're splitting each metaphor into 2 noun phrases, and later we're going to join together those noun phrases with the word is, with that to be verb conjugation. And so with our first metaphor, all the world is a stage, our first noun phrase is going to be all the world. And you're going to want to put this in quotation marks because it's a string. And in Python, which is the language that we're using for this project, we format strings using quotation marks. And so down here, it clearly tells the students this is what you're doing. So if you don't have to worry too much about students having to figure out how to split the metaphors. So we have all the world, and then we're going to have a stage. So we're not including the word is because we're going to be adding that in later. So right now we are just assigning our noun phrases to variables. So far we have variables noun phrase 1a and then noun phrase 1b. Then we're going to have noun phrase 2a, which is going to be the first noun phrase in our second metaphor. And our second metaphor is Juliet is the sun. So that means the first, the value for this first variable is going to be Juliet. And then we're going to have noun phrase to be. And that's going to be the sun. And then we're just going to keep going here. Okay, so then we're going to have noun phrase 3a, which is dying. And then noun phrase 3b, which is wild night. Actually, we're going to make this a wild night. Yeah, because we have dying is a wild night. So we're going to say a wild night. So yeah, and we have that here. So then, just as like a review, so down here it says to the students on lines 2 through 7, type this code, right? So this is what they need to type, and that is what I have typed up here. So now we have all of the variables that we're going to need for now. So notice that we have split our metaphors into these noun phrases, and we have assigned those noun phrases to these variables over here. Okay, so then step 4, this is basically where we're going to teach our program our formula for our metaphor formula. So we're going to go here to 9, and then we're just basically going to copy what we have over here on the left in that code area. So our first metaphor, so we've split our metaphors apart, and now we need to bring them back together. And in order to add them back together, we're going to use concatenation, which just basically means to add things together in code. So for the first one, we're going to have noun phrase 1 plus, and then remember our connector word is. This is the to be verb conjugation that we're using. You will want to make sure to add an extra space inside the quotation marks here. Otherwise, the words are going to be smushed up against each other. So make sure you have some extra space in there. And then noun phrase 1b. Oops, this should be 1a. So we have noun phrase 1a plus is plus noun phrase 1b. So we basically taught our program the formula for our metaphor. And since we have 3 metaphors, we're going to have 3 variables. We're going to have metaphor 1, metaphor 2, and metaphor 3. So let's do metaphor 2. So that's going to be noun phrase 2a plus is, whoops, plus noun phrase to be metaphor 3 noun phrase 3a plus. Yeah. Okay, so now here we have declared 3 new variables, metaphor 1, metaphor 2, metaphor 3, and we have taught our program the formula for our metaphor, which is that a metaphor equals the noun phrase plus the to-be verb conjugation plus the second noun phrase. So again, up here, we split up our metaphors, and down here we are joining our metaphors back together again computationally. So then in step 5, so now we've basically written all the code for our project. Now we just need to write a little bit more code so that we can actually see the results of our program. So in order to do that, we're going to use something called print. So this is a function in Python that allows you to display the results of your code. So we're going to do print, and then in parentheses we're going to do metaphor 1. So this metaphor 1, this is the variable that we have up here. So we are referencing that, and then we're going to do the same thing here. Metaphor 2, and then we're going to have another thing here, metaphor 3. Okay, so now we've told our program, okay, we want to see our metaphors. We want to print those out. So now, once you've written that, you're going to go up here to this arrow and click, and ta-da! You'll see your metaphors. Yeah, and you're done. So again, this is a fun project that you can do with your students to help them learn about metaphors and to think about the structure of metaphors, to teach them some Python code, and to just help them think about language in new ways. So I hope that you enjoyed this project. Please, and this demo, please leave any comments below, and as always, have fun with language and happy coding.